Index Universal Life Insurance, better known as an IUL. Is it a scam or is it something that should definitely be a part of your wealth building strategy? Welcome back to Carlton for Life. My name is Carlton, and I'm here to educate you on how to use life insurance to build, preserve, and pass on wealth. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most controversial life insurance products in the industry, IULs. IUL stands for Index Universal Life Insurance. The question is it a scam? If you go online and look into IULs, you're going to see some people saying that it is the worst thing ever and you should never use them. And you're going to hear other people saying it's the best thing that could happen to you. You should definitely be using them. By the end of this video, you should have the knowledge necessary to make an unbiased decision based on the facts on whether or not an IUL is a scam or if it should definitely be a part of your wealth building strategy. So like, share, subscribe, and let's get into it. Okay, Index Universal Life Insurance, better known as the IUL. Is it a scam? Listen, let's first define what an IUL is. And disclaimer, IULs are, in my opinion, the most complicated life insurance product on the market. They are complicated. I'm going to try to explain them quickly, and then we'll talk about whether or not they're a scam. Okay, let's get into this. An IUL, at its core, is a life insurance policy, right? Let's start there. It is a life insurance policy. You pay a premium. When you die, your family should receive a death benefit. Let's start there. IULs have a cash value component that links your cash value to a stock market index. Let's say like the S&P 500. They will credit your cash value depending on the performance of the stock market index your cash value is linked to. So for example, if your cash value is linked to the S&P 500 and the S&P 500 is profitable in a given year, then your account will be credited in accordance with a participation rate, a cap, a floor, and maybe a spread, right? So let's give you an example so you can understand what it is that I'm talking about. Let's say that you get an IUL, you have 100% of your cash value linked to the S&P 500. In a given year, the S&P 500 goes up 20%. If you have a cap of, let's say, 10%, then you'll only be credited 10% even though the S&P 500 went up 20%. That's the cap. If you have a floor of 0%, then if the S&P 500 drops 20% in a given year, your cash value won't lose any money because you have a floor. You also have something called a participation rate. You might have a spread instead of a cap. We're not going to get into the weeds on those things, right? Let's just understand that's the gist of how they work, right? And that's how a life insurance agent would explain it to you if they were talking to you about IULs. You've got the opportunity to have a life insurance policy that takes advantage of stock market increases, and you don't have to risk any money because you will not take part in stock market losses. Now, that on its face sounds good, right? That should sound good to anyone. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. Anytime something sounds too good to be true, as a responsible consumer, you need to ask questions. The first time I heard an agent telling me about an IUL, the first question I asked was how. I need to know how a life insurance company could be able to credit my account when the index that I'm tied to does great, but if it crashes, they don't have to take any money out of my account. As a responsible buyer, you should be asking how. Now, at the time, what I was thinking was that maybe they make up for the difference when you have a cap. Let's say if the S&P 500 goes up 20%, if they cap me at 10, right, and they keep that extra 10%, maybe on the down years, that's where they make up for the money. It didn't make sense though, because if you got a really bad year, if you got like, if the stock market, if the S&P 500 drops 30% one year, even if they had taken money off the top for a few years, it just didn't mathematically make sense to me. So I started asking these agents, how is it possible that they do this? A lot of them couldn't even explain it to me, right? And that's why the first part of what I'm going to talk about is complexity. These policies are complex, right? And life insurance agents that sell them, in my opinion, oversimplify them. Oh, don't worry. Oh, you get a life insurance, you link it to an index. Oh, look how much money you're going to make, right? They're not talking about the inner mechanisms of how these policies work. I'm going to quickly go over how they're able to credit your account when the stock market does great, and how they can give you a floor when the stock market does bad and not have to take any money away from you. They do something called leap call options, right? Depending on what index you use, they'll have an options budget. They'll take your cash value and they'll have an options budget for call options they buy on the index your account is linked to. So for example, if you say I want 100% of my cash value in the S&P 500, they're going to buy a 1-year call option on the S&P 500. If the S&P 500 is profitable, that call option is profitable and they credit your account. If the S&P 500 ends up in the negatives at the end of that year, the option expires worthless. You don't have to lose any money, right? You just lose the money you spent on the call option. That's how it works. If you don't understand what I just said and don't understand how call options work, then maybe you should not be getting an IUL, right? Because I'm not saying you got to be a stock market guru to get an IUL. I'm just saying that you should kind of understand the basics of how call options work, because how they work truly goes into the complexities of IULs and why they're set up the way they're set up. And by that, I mean, why are there so many different indexes now that you can choose from? It used to be that you get an IUL, you link it to the S&P 500, one of the more known indexes. Now you got all kind of indexes that these IULs are using. Some of them created by the life insurance carriers, right? They're coming up with their own indexes called volatility control indexes, where they can control the assets within the index in case there's a volatile market to help protect the life insurance company. So when you are getting your IUL and they're designing it, you'll hear about all these different indexes that you can choose from to link your cash value to. Now, why have the carriers started to use different indexes? It's because over the years, call options on the S&P 500 have become very expensive. So the life insurance companies can no longer show illustrations with great returns, with great participation rates and caps, because they're spending too much money on the options budgets on the S&P 500 calls. You got a lot of retail investors in the market now with apps like Robinhood. These options are way more expensive than they used to be. Now, if you can purchase options on an index that you created, right, a volatility control index that you created, they're a lot more inexpensive for you, and you can have unlimited gains, right? Participation rates over 100%, caps unlimited, right? Uncapped potential. It looks a lot better, right? So my first thing I'll have to say about IULs that they're super complicated. The second issue I have with IULs is the illustrations are overly optimistic. They look too good. If as an agent I show a client what they can potentially make with an IUL on their cash value over the course of the next 20, 30, 40 years, it's a lot easier for me to sell that than it is for me to sell a whole life insurance policy. And it's because I'm showing them gains that look great, right? I'm showing them a policy that in 30 years, 40 years, they could have over $1 million in it, right? It will grow in a way that the client will be excited to buy the policy. Whereas if I showed them the illustration for a whole life insurance policy, they'll be like, that's good returns, right? So it's easier for the agent to sell when I'm showing you something that is overly optimistic. Now, some agents will say, well, it depends on how you design it. Some agents are designing it a certain way. Listen, these policies are so overly optimistic that insurance regulators had to come out with 3 different guidelines to rein in the carriers and say, listen, you cannot show these kind of illustrations, right? The guidelines were to protect the consumer because these illustrations were looking way too profitable and it was getting too bad. So they came out, every time they came out with a regulation, the carrier would find a loophole to still make it look good. So they came out with 3 different regulations. I'm sure there's more to come. And the only reason I say that is to say that it's not just me saying this. It's not my opinion about them being too optimistic. The insurance regulators have come out with 3 different guidelines trying to stop carriers from coming out with these overly optimistic illustrations. And even now, I still see illustrations that are still too optimistic, in my opinion, even with those guidelines, right? They got a long way to go. So 1, too complicated. 2, illustrations overly optimistic. The difference between what can happen and what will happen is way too far from me. I'll give you a quick example. In order for the illustration for the IUL you're looking at to fulfill what it says it's going to do, you need everything to stay consistent. You need the stock market indices you're invested with to stay current, what they're at consistently. You need the participation rate, the spread, the cap, the floor to stay the same. You need the internal fees to stay the same. Guess what? Life insurance company controls all of that. They are in control. The chances of all of that staying the same over the next 30, 40 years, not likely. Now, with a whole life insurance policy, you get paid a guaranteed rate on your cash value, and you get the potential to earn a dividend. That's all. The guaranteed section of a whole life policy shows what happens if you get that guaranteed rate every single year, which is guaranteed. The non-guaranteed side shows if you get a dividend every year. Very simple. Now, the last part, and for me, the most important part that I'll say about IULs is the way the cost of insurance is structured. Although you pay the same premium every single month, inside of the IUL, the internal mechanisms of the inside of the IUL, the cost of insurance is going up over time. So, for example, if you get a IUL and you're paying $500 a month, every month you'll pay $500, but the cost of insurance is increasing every single month. So a 30-year-old that gets, let's say, a $500,000 IUL, that first year, the cost of insurance is super low because you're 30 years old, you're young, you're healthy. The chances of you dying that year are super slim. The life insurance company is not going to charge you that much for the cost of insurance. So a lot of the premium you're paying is going towards your cash value and other things instead of going towards the cost of insurance. As you get older, the cost of insurance goes up. Why? Listen, a 40-year-old is not as young as a 30-year-old, right? So the cost of insurance for a 40-year-old is a lot more than for a 30-year-old. The same for a 50-year-old, the same for a 60-year-old. When you start getting past expected life, right? When you start getting to 60, 70, 80 years old, the cost of insurance goes up so much so that if you look at an illustration of an IUL and scroll down to about 80 years old, most of them will show a lapse if you look in the guaranteed section for the policy, which means after a certain age, when you get in your upper 70s and 80s, the life insurance company guarantees you nothing. They're telling you, we're not able to guarantee you'll still have life insurance at 80 years old because the cost of insurance has gotten so expensive. Now, is the policy going to lapse? Probably not, right? Not if you've been funding it, not if hopefully everything went according to plan, but I don't like the fact that they won't guarantee me that I'm still going to have a life insurance policy. So, 3 things. IULs are super complicated. IULs, the illustrations are overly optimistic. The difference between what can happen and what will happen for me is kind of far apart. It's not likely if you're looking at some of these illustrations. And 3, the cost of insurance structure is set up in a way that as you get older, the cost of insurance gets so expensive that when you get like 80 years old, 90 years old, the life insurance company guarantees you nothing. I don't like any of that, right? That's why I tend to like whole life insurance more guarantees, more simple, less complicated. Does that mean an IUL is a scam? I'm not going to go so far as to call them scams. I'm going to say that they're super complex that I don't think even the agents understand them. Everything I've said in this video so far is only scratching the surface when it comes to the complexities of IULs. I still don't fully understand them. You understand? Like, you could get a college degree on IULs. That's how complicated they are. People have written books on IULs. That's how complicated they are. And that's why you have people calling them scams, because I think agents are going out and they're making it seem like this simple, risk-free policy, and people that kind of understand what they truly are, they are blowing the whistle and saying that these policies are not what you think they are. Don't get scammed. I'm not going to call them a scam, but I'm going to say buyer beware. Caveat emptor. You must ask the questions. You must fully understand what it is you're getting. Have your agent answer all your questions and break down how an IUL works. And if you fully understand all the mechanisms of an IUL, and if you like what you're hearing after they break that down to you, if they can break it down to you, a lot of agents don't even know all of the things that they need to know. But if they can break that all down to you and you like it, and it's for you, get it. It's not a scam, but you need to understand what's going on. I think the scam is people trying to sell them as a simple, risk-free life insurance policy. They are not. They are complicated, they are full of risk, and you need to understand what it is you're buying before you buy it. So, final answer, IULs, scam? No, they're not a scam, just complicated, right? Unnecessarily complicated, by the way. In my opinion, get in touch with an agent like me, get a properly designed whole life insurance company from a mutual life insurance company, and save yourself the headache, right? Focus on building wealth and doing the things that you like to do, because too much time and energy is going to go into learning how IUL works. If you felt like this video was useful, or if you think this video can be useful to someone you know, do me a favor. Like, share, subscribe. And remember, a client with Carlton today, it's a client with Carlton for life.